250LM was produced during a golden period for Ferrari. Between 1958 and 1965, they were only beaten at Le Mans once. They won 3 F1 World Championships with Mike Hawthorn, Phil Hill and John Surtees. And this car was introduced at the 1964 Paris Salon as their answer and alternative to supersede the 250 GTO that had already become iconic and so successful. It was Enzo Ferrari's answer to the ever-troubling Carroll Shelby effort with his AC Cobras in the GT Championship. In order to avoid building 100 cars for homologation purposes, Enzo argued that it was a true successor to the 250 GT series that had the 250 GT short wheelbase in it and could trace its roots right back to the mid-1950s 250 long wheelbase. Enzo Ferrari argued that the car was a true evolution of that original design. When we look at this early chassis frame, it's obvious to see why Enzo Ferrari's argument was so swiftly rejected by the governing body. Apart from its 2.4 metre wheelbase, that's pretty much all it shared with the GTO that it was replacing. In fact, this car was simply a 250p with a roof on it. And the 250p was the car that won Le Mans in 1963 and 64 for Ferrari. It had a space frame chassis, a mid-engine V12 fitted to the car, transaxle, inboard brakes, and was effectively a prototype. Most cars were even right-hand drive, just like the prototypes. So the final icing on the cake was the fact that the car was called a 250LM. Only the prototype had a 250 or 3-litre engine. Every single LM built after that was actually 275 cc per cylinder, 3.3 litre. So in reality, this car should have been called a 275 LM, but clearly Enzo knew what he was trying to do was on the edge.
Ferrari's sales brochure for the LM celebrated its link with the 250p. The outright winner of the Le Mans 1963 can truly be called the parent of this latest Berlinetta competition model. It embodies all of the experience and features of the cars which have been the most successful in recent world long-distance competitions. The reliability and power of its 12-cylinder engine have become legendary, and the rigidity and strength of the chassis have been amply demonstrated.
When motor racing's governing body refused to let the car run in the GT class as an evolution of the 250 GT bloodline, it was forced instead to run in the prototype category. Now this was a problem for Ferrari as they had already built and designed faster, more capable machinery for the job. However, it didn't stop the LM winning all over the world that year in 1964, winning at places such as Monza, Elkhart Lake, and of course Kyalami. Not bad for a car that was racing in a category it wasn't designed for. This homologation controversy dragged on into the 1965 season, and all LMs had to continue racing as a prototype. However, Enzo Ferrari had a new car, the 275 GTB, but to add fuel to the fire, this too was denied homologation as a GT car and was also forced to race as a prototype. So angry was the old man that he decided to withdraw from GT racing as a works team entirely. And the job was left to the privateers, and into this maelstrom came one particular 250LM, the 30th of 32 built, chassis 6313, and a team, Écurie-Francorchamps, who were particularly powerful at that point in time. Founded in 1950 by Jacques Swatters and friends, Écurie Belgique, which later combined with Équipe Nationale Belge, was a fabulous racing team. They finished the Le Mans 24 Hours 7th overall and first in class with this very car in 1957, a Ferrari 500 TRC. Jacques Swatters had been obsessed with the Ferrari marque since 1948, when he saw Luigi Canetti racing his 166 at Spa. And in 1954, he founded his dealership, Garage Francorchamps, based out of Brussels, which would serve the whole Benelux region. And then in 1960, he formed his team, Écurie-Francorchamps. It was teams like Écurie-Francorchamps that would help Ferrari build their brand and build their presence on the automotive scene and become the most powerful manufacturer in the world that they've become today. Teams like Nart, Filipinetti and Francorchamps, every single time there was a new racing car, right through to the 70s with the competition factory Daytonas, the 512Ss, the 512Ms. Those teams, those distributors, they would buy those cars, race them with great success, win races and help build that brand. It was all part of Enzo Ferrari's strategy. So good was Écurie-Francorchamps that between 57 and 61 they won the Tour de France 5 times on the trot. In 1962 they finished Le Mans 3rd overall. In 1963 they finished 2nd overall. And in 1965 they came heartbreakingly close to winning the race overall, taking 2nd at the end of the day with this very car. During 1965, Écurie-Francorchamps campaigned their brand new 250LM 6313 in the World Sports Car Championship. They raced the car at Monza, Spa and the Nürburgring before arriving at Le Mans. During that season, Ferrari had focused as a works team on the 275 and 330 P2s with their quad-cam engines, and they had won overall at the Nürburgring, Monza, the Targa Florio and of course Rheims. It was very important for Ferrari to uphold their glory at Les Sarthe, as they'd been so successful in recent years, but Ford was an ever-increasing threat. Few would have realised that at the end of the day, it was going to be a 250LM that would uphold Maranello's honour for one last time, and 6313 was very, very nearly that car and absolutely in the thick of it throughout the race.
The fact that a Ferrari won the 1965 Le Mans 24 Hours was not a surprise. After all, Maranello had not been beaten at Les Sarthe since 1959. Few people, however, had predicted that it would be a pair of 250LMs that would be fighting it out at the front come Sunday afternoon. The expectation had been that the ever-growing threat from Ford would be countered by a trio of works prototypes, 330 P2s. Instead, as the clock ticked down towards the end, all eyes were on 6313. Driven on this occasion by Pierre Dumais and Gustave Gosselin, and the Nart-entered 5893, which had been entrusted to Maston Gregory and a young Austrian hotshoe by the name of Jochen Rindt. For Ford, hopes had been high after the Shelby American cars had filled the first 4 places at Daytona in February. Come the 24 Hours itself, Shelby American entered thunderous new 7-litre Mark IIs for Ken Miles and Bruce McLaren and Phil Hill and Chris Amon. They were backed up by no less than 5 4.7-litre GT40s, plus a quartet of Cobra Daytona coupes. The pair of Mark IIs roared into an early lead, but both were soon struck with terminal gearbox troubles. 3 of the 4.7-litre GT40s also dropped out, and it took only until the 3rd hour for Ferraris to fill the first 5 places. During the night, however, all 3 works P2s started to have trouble. Whilst everyone else hit trouble, on what was still very much an endurance race, 6313 ran perfectly and was leading by the early hours of Sunday morning. As a warm sun appeared over the horizon, the yellow 250LM continued to tick off laps at a consistent rate. It was being chased by the Nart LM of Rindt and Gregory, plus the Écurie-Francorchamps 275 of Moraes and Blaton. By late morning, 6313's advantage was half a lap over the charging Rindt and Gregory. Next would come the yellow LM's race-defining moment. 6313's right rear tyre exploded on the Mulsanne straight, badly damaging the right rear wing and forcing the car to limp around to the pits. Minutes were lost before Dumais climbed aboard to complete a slow lap before he stopped again and handed over to Gosselin once more. It took a number of stops and repairs until the yellow LM was able to lap with any sort of consistency, by which time the Rindt and Gregory car had come past into an unassailable lead. There was a little bit of late drama when the leading 250LM had to be nursed to the checkered flag due to a failing differential. After being delayed by various problems early in the race, Gregory and Rindt had driven flat out in an effort to break the car so they could go home early, and driven through the night into Sunday morning. It was only Gregory's gentle touch near the end that ensured that it reached the finish when they realised they were within a chance of winning the race overall.
Having played a starring role in such a memorable race, the car crossed the line in 2nd overall. Another Écurie-Francorchamps car finished 3rd on the podium, a 275 GTB, and once again the privateers had helped Ferrari save their blushes and held off the threat from Ford. But we all know that wasn't to last for long, because in 1966 the blue oval struck back and it was the end of an era. As such, this historic 1-2 for the 250LMs was the last time a Ferrari ever won Le Mans, and it was very nearly this car that did it. To finish off the 65 season, there were 2 more races for this car. It raced at Rheims and then Angola, following which it retired from international racing. In the following years, it was owned by many notable collectors and formed part of some of the biggest collections in the world. However, something curious had happened in the late 60s, and as often was the case, for carnet reasons, the identity of this car had been swapped. Therefore, for many years, this car ran around using the identity of 6023. But it wasn't until 1999 that this was cleared up by Keith Blumell, the noted historian. And it was a very simple fact. This car was the only Écurie-Francorchamps car to have 2 windscreen wiper spindles. Therefore, looking at it and then referring back to period photographs and records, we were able at that time to determine the exact race history of this car and therefore confirm that it actually was 6313. In 2000, we helped sell this car to the previous owner, and we ran the car for many years in historic motorsport and events such as Goodwood, and actually carried out a full restoration in 2002 to 2003. The current owner has enjoyed the car equally as much and has raced the car all over Europe, including returning to Le Mans with 2 overall race victories at the Le Mans Legends race before the actual 24 hours. In 2014, it was decided to apply for the Red Book Class K certification. Such is the strictness and stringentness of the certification process at the factory that the car had to return there for a full restoration and going through. At that time, Ferrari agreed with the fact that this car was indeed 6313, and the necessary measures were put in place to swap the identities back between the two cars. And as such, this car is now certified with a Red Book Class K certification and is presented in its as finished, fully restored state.
Any 250LM stands shoulder to shoulder with the GTO and the series of P cars that achieved so many top-level victories in the mid-1960s. Its place in history is secure as a model that superseded the 250 GTO and delivered Ferrari its most recent outright victory at Le Mans. The combination of its Colombo V12, its Pininfarina-designed Scaglietti-built bodywork, and mechanical layout derived from the all-conquering 250P means that it nearly bridged the gap between GT cars of the early 60s and the sports racing coupes that ruled Le Sarthe at the end of the decade. Little wonder that it remains one of the marque's most revered models, and few 250LMs boast a history of 6313. It's finished in the specification that it was presented in when it started that famous race in 1965, both interior and exterior. That race being the occasion when it almost was the very last Ferrari to win Le Mans.